Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 26 series, Rescue the Rockies. And want to thank everyone who has opined since our last episode on their recommendations for this upcoming first-year player draft here in 2027. Apologies that it's a relatively quick turnaround. It's only been about 8.5, 9 hours since I posted the last episode as I'm starting to record this. So I'm sure by the time I have finished this episode, several others of you will have opined, and apologies that you won't be able to influence my decision-making directly. But the good news is that there is a very clear top two players for us to consider in this draft, and they're really kind of the guys that were the top two on my list from my initial look earlier today when doing the episode. So I don't think anyone would be able to say anything to get me off of the two players that we are going to be strongly considering here with the 24th pick in the draft. The two players are both expected to, in one case, already have gone in the draft, and in another case, be picked very shortly from now. So if we're going to bring either of these guys on board, and we will be bringing one of them on board, I think that now is the time to do it. Obviously, there's some weird universe in which the other one falls to us in the second round. I'd love it if that happens, although I'm not necessarily expecting it. So the two players are the high school left fielder Ryan Wescott. Definitely a lot to like about him. He is, according to our scout, the highest potential position player still available in the draft. Really good personality traits with high adaptability and work ethic. And we look at 70-plus contact, gap power in eye. That is all very helpful if he reaches his full potential. And again, with the big investment we've got in coaching, in player development, and some of his personality traits, he's got as good a chance of anybody of reaching his true potential if he joins our organization. Not too many negatives to consider with Mr. Wescott. The home run power at its peak is only slightly above average. We still could live with that. Not the greatest speed in the world, which does potentially negate some of the value of that outstanding gap power. And he certainly doesn't look like he's going to be a particularly useful defensive outfielder, particularly in cores. But if he really ends up being a guy with 70 contact, 65 gap power, 70 eye, and average home run power, he can probably play pretty well as a designated hitter for us. The OSA has him with the same potential. I'm looking at everything to decide between these two guys. The only real difference between our head scout, who clearly we trust more in the OSA, is that the OSA does have his gap power and his home run power a notch lower, but his BABIP is actually a notch higher with the OSA scout. So certainly nothing there that's going to influence our decision one way or another. Had a monster season in high school this year, .464 batting average, drew 48 walks, and put up a 5.5 WAR in just 38 games. As you would expect, he was pretty dominant as a high schooler, as a potential first-round pick in the draft. And Westcott is projected to go 26th overall to the Twins. We're picking 24th overall, so presumably if we want to bring Ryan Wescott on board, now would be the time to do it. Similarly, the other guy that we're thinking seriously about, and we'll talk through shortly where the worldwide scouting department has come down on these two players, is another outfielder, but in this case a college outfielder, Trent Clawson out of Oregon State. He is certainly, as a college player, more well-developed, potentially outstanding gap power to go with slightly above average contact, home run power, and eye if he does reach his true potential. The home run power being only a 35 currently for a guy who's almost 22 years old is not optimal, but that is arguably going to be the least valuable of his offensive traits anyways. Certainly think if he ends up average to above average in contact, home run power, and eye, with potentially great gap power and very good speed, he could be a pretty useful offensive player for us. And we have struggled in recent years to kind of fill those corner outfield spots capably. If he's an above average offensive player with good speed and base running instincts, with that 65 outfield range, think he could also be a pretty useful left fielder for us down the line. Has high leadership, which we like. Doesn't have the greatest baseball intelligence in the world, which is a negative. And if both of these players reach their peak, I think that Westcott is a bit better of an offensive player. Clawson, in my mind, potentially offsets some of that with his better speed and his better fielding that he brings. Taking a look at the OSA ratings, the OSA actually sees him with 80 potential. Don't know how much stock I put in that, but they see him as a much better potential contact hitter with a 10-point higher ceiling than we currently have on him. And they also have his range and his speed a little bit higher for whatever that's worth. I'm certainly not going to let the OSA scouting overwhelm what our scout thinks. Average scouting accuracy and medium development risk for Trent Clawson. When we take a look at Westcott, still medium development risk, but we do have high scouting accuracy on him, so we feel a little better that we know what we're getting in the case of Mr. Westcott. And there are several other guys that we liked that we talked about at the end of the last episode, both pitchers and position players, and I think it is conceivable that with the 24th pick in the second round, some of them will fall to us, and I think some of the relievers that we talked about could even be there in the third round. So feel like there's definitely an opportunity for us to really come out of this draft liking the first 3 or 4 picks in our class. No guarantee that it's going to happen, but no guarantee that it's not going to happen either. So ultimately, when we think about Westcott and Clawson, different offensive players, the potential in terms of contact, BABIP, and avoiding strikeouts heavily favors Mr. Westcott, but he's also an 18-year-old high school player who's got somewhat more work to do to get there, although right now Clawson is only 5 points higher than him. The gap power definitely favors Clawson, particularly when you factor in it's not only 15 points higher in terms of the gap power, but his speed is also materially higher. Home run power, a dead heat for both of them, and then the eye potentially favors Westcott heavily. So if we're going for where they are today, Clawson's obviously 3.5 years older and much more developed. If we go to what they can become in the future offensively, Westcott definitely has a higher ceiling than Mr. Clawson. Bunting favors Clawson marginally, and then speed and base running instincts heavily favor Mr. Clawson. As we also alluded to, defensively, the outfield range strongly favors Clawson, also a higher error rating. Wescott does have a better arm, but no question that if we think about these guys defensively, Clawson is certainly the superior prospect, at least according to what our scout is telling us. As I mentioned earlier, gotten a lot of feedback from the worldwide scouting department on which way to go among these two guys, and these were kind of the two that we highlighted as the initial review, the two that we thought were the most interesting, and haven't really heard anything substantive otherwise from the OOTP worldwide scouting department of ours to get me off of this view. Paul West and Kevin McDowell both basically said, hey, really like Westcott, really like Clawson, can't go wrong either way. Had a couple of scouts, Undercover Boomer and NS1 CLRK, that really liked Westcott. NS1 CLRK in particular was lower on Clawson than some others, and, made a compelling case that at this point in our organization development, maybe we should be thinking more about the ceiling of a player rather than taking perhaps a safer route with our draft pick. So definitely a lot to think about there. So overall, 4 people in Team Westcott or Team just make a pick. You can't go wrong either way. Clawson definitely ended up being the overwhelming favorite of the Worldwide Scouting Department. Sir Valerian, Fluffy Dog 987, Charles Rosa, Not My Four-Ply, SR Alkshi, Alex the Tall, Raymond Effinger, Kyle B, Fake Name, Ian Bladestaff, Avery Sham, and YME 943, all down with Mr. Clawson, although even many of them recognize that it's not necessarily a total binary decision here. There's an argument that either way we're going to get a pretty good player for number 24 overall, and hopefully it's a decision that we can't go wrong with. I am ultimately going to go with what my initial instinct was and with what was ultimately the recommendation of the Worldwide Scouting Department, and we are going to go with Mr. Clawson. I think that his profile potentially plays very well for us in Coors Field with that potentially outstanding gap power, really good speed. I think we're going to have to be a little lucky and have him max out, but he can be above average in everything with that incredible gap power and speed, which would be a pretty useful offensive player, and I think he can be a pretty useful defensive player. Don't love the low baseball IQ, but the high leadership in the locker room also helps, says he leads by example on the field, so maybe down the line he becomes a captain personality for us as we get to know him better. Which would be, another little step in the right direction. Definitely will be tracking what happens with Mr. Wescott. We're going to add him to our prospects shortlist right now, so we can determine 5, 10, 15 years from now whether or not we made the right decision. But we are going to go ahead and meet Trent Clawson's demand, which is just slightly under slot. I am assuming Mr. Westcott will be down and gone very soon, but we'll auto draft up to our second round pick and see who is on the clock, and we'll also check in and see where Mr. Westcott ended up going. And Westcott only lasted a few more picks after ours. He ended up going to the Cardinals, so a nice acquisition there for the team that won the World Series last year and is one of the better teams in baseball this year. Probably going to be 4 or 5 years till Westcott can potentially help them, but certainly a very interesting player to consider. The draft pool still does have some of the guys that we talked about available, so maybe we'll get some good value here in round number 2. The top hitting prospects that are still available include shortstop Brian Jones. We talked about him last episode. Shortstop out of Vanderbilt, if he fully develops, looks like he can be an above-average offensive player. Don't know much about his personality. Does have pretty decent infield range. A guy who at this point is even looking for a little less than slot. We don't have to be particularly careful with the money this year because we've got a ton of extra money in our budget at this point, as you can see. Some of that conceivably we'll be using to bring on players who may help us hopefully guide this team back into the playoffs as rentals here over the next 3 weeks before we get to the trade deadline, but still definitely feel like we can afford to go over slot for just about anybody that we would be selecting in these next few rounds. Right fielder Ted Miller is another guy that we talked about and liked his bat as well. Durable 18-year-old, high leadership, not great defensively, but a pretty interesting potential bat that we think could be above average at everything with borderline exceptional gap power. Chris Piver, another corner outfielder, a little less interesting to me. The contact and the gap power both could be incredible, but the home run power and the eye a little less compelling than what we potentially have with the likes of Jones and Miller. And then the first baseman, Darius Sewell, is a guy that we talked about last episode as well. With him, it's all about the home run power, and the eye does have high work ethic. The speed and the defense are not particularly impressive. And as expected, there still are some interesting pitchers that we talked about last episode on the market as well. Pimba Jean is a heck of a prospect, potential 6-pitch arsenal, potential incredible stuff, well above average movement. My concerns, and we talked about this last episode, are the awful control that we think he has, the fact that he's fragile already at the age of 18, and a few negative personality traits. But still, for a second-round pick, you'd have to get incredibly lucky with that control for him to be a really productive major league pitcher. Some of you have made the point, hey, it's going to take multiple walks for him to really be hurting you, and he's not going to be giving up a lot of hits if he reaches his full potential. I still don't know if I love a second-round pick on him, but I could certainly understand the argument for it. Closer Matt Sanderson, potential 3-pitch guy, would have to improve his stamina to really be able to be a starter, but we do think his stuff, movement, and control could all be well above average, and he's got some really positive personality traits. I don't know that we take him in the second round, but if a guy like Sanderson was sitting around in round number 3, he'd be very hard for me to let go of. Alan Hammond, 18-year-old, committed to Notre Dame, potential 3.5-pitch arsenal. Another guy whose control could be his most limiting factor, but we think the upside of his control is still materially different than Mr. Pimba. And then a few relievers also available as well. Joel Heflin out of Westchester University. Probably not a guy that we take in the second round, but throws 100 miles an hour, positive personality traits. If he lasts a bit longer, he could be interesting. David Pacheco, 19-year-old reliever. Don't love some of the personality traits, but another guy who looks like he could have some pretty intimidating stuff if he fully develops. Chris Predmore, 21-year-old out of Sussex County Community College. We talked about him last time around. He's pretty well developed at this point, not too far off from being a useful right-handed arm out of the bullpen. And then Matt Stone, another interesting relief prospect, although we definitely don't love the low adaptability and work ethic with him. The pitchers are interesting to me, but I'm leaning towards, and ultimately, if I say I'm leaning towards, it means I'm going to go with one of the position players. To me, the big question is, which one do we go with? And it ended up coming down to 3 players for me, although Darius Sewell, with his tendency to strike out, lack of speed, and lack of defense, isn't typically a profile I'd love. The potential home run power and the potential eye are certainly something that I need to be thinking about taking, particularly with a second-round pick. Ted Miller, to me, is kind of a poor man's version of Mr. Westcott. If I think about these two guys, as we talked about with Wescott, neither was a particularly good fielder. Neither had great speed. Westcott was definitely a better potential contact hitter, but Miller, I think, is a little higher with the gap power and the home run power, and a little bit lower in the eye. Miller, durable as far as his injury proneness. The high leadership is positive. Similar to Mr. Sewell, Miller also looking for well above slot here. Jones would slot in real nicely as someone who's not too far off major league quality. If he gets halfway to his potential, he's kind of a average-ish major league bat, which with a decent but not great infield glove is a useful player. I don't love the frustrates easily part of his personality, but doesn't seem like there's any huge red flags with him. Ultimately, we are going to take advantage of the fact that we've got some extra money to spend this year. When we look at the mock draft, the high school outfielder Ted Miller was projected to go even before our first pick. Not that the mock draft is everything in the world, but as I noted, if we think about Mr. Ted Miller and then we think about the guy that we passed on in Ryan Wescott, no doubt that Ryan Wescott is better, but offensively there's not a massive difference in terms of their potential outside of the contact, which does, as I talked about, definitely favor Mr. Wescott, but the gap power favors Miller. Home runs favor Miller, and then the eye favors Miller. Speed favors Miller a little bit, and then ultimately when we're thinking about defensive ratings, neither looks like a gold glove outfielder, but Miller on the margin is slightly higher, at least right now, in terms of his outfield range. So again, I don't think the ultimate peak Miller bat is the same as Westcott. Definitely not trying to say that. But I think having passed on Westcott, being able to pick up a guy like Ted Miller here with a second round pick is a pretty attractive option for us, and we're going to end up making a higher bonus offer to him than we did to our first round pick, Mr. Clawson. We'll see if any of the guys that we've been talking about as far as position players or pitchers happen to fall to round 3 next. So sim ahead, and definitely looks like there are players that we've talked about still around. Did lose the college shortstop out of Vanderbilt, but Piver and Sewell are both there. Taking a look at some of the top pitchers available, we're down to the relievers. Pacheco, Predmore, Braddock. Pacheco and Predmore are the two that we talked about. And then there's some other relievers who have reasonable ceilings, a couple of starting pitchers as well. Tony Martinez. Fly ball tendencies, kind of a 3-pitch guy. Not horrible value for a third rounder, but I don't think that's a direction we'd go. And then Anson Siebert out of Tennessee. Another guy with fly ball tendencies, another guy who at almost 22 years old is going to have to develop that changeup to really be a starter. The control not great. I think there are some secondary players that I've looked at here that I want to take another look at before I make a decision. But given that we've got money to spend, Darius Sewell in the third round is pretty tempting to me right now. And as much as I like Sewell's profile, we are going to go in a different direction. We're going to go with the center fielder, Sam Gray. Pretty interesting prospect. The contact and the gap power are both potentially borderline outstanding. Home run power could also be above average. He's not going to draw a ton of walks, which isn't great, but a very good-looking defensive prospect, pretty good speed and good base running instincts, and also excellent personality with high leadership, loyalty, work ethic, and low financial ambition. I also like Doug Bartholomew, still like Sewell. Piver, even in the fourth round, if he drops, would be a great opportunity. But Sam Gray here to me is just too attractive. Feel bad potentially letting some of these relievers go by, but to me, the quality of some of these position players is just too attractive. So we're going to pick Gray with the 18th pick in the third round, move forward to the fourth round, and still some interesting players available. I told you that I liked Doug Bartholo. Didn't look at him last time. The first baseman is off the market at this point. Bartholo, I don't know that we need to pick up a third outfielder in the first four rounds. Actually, it would be a fourth outfielder in the first four rounds. Don't know that we need that, but you look at Bartholo and contact and gap power, both potentially incredible. The difference between him and the guy that we just picked is that he's got a better eye, but very little home run power. Not as good defensively, similar speed profile, and a pretty good bunter. Piver, pretty similar profile when all is said and done. Given that we've gone back to back with outfielders, I'm going to give a little more credence to looking at some other positions, including pitchers right now. But if we're able to get a guy like Doug Bartholo in the fourth round, I think he can do a lot worse than that. And some of the pitchers that we have been looking at are still on the market. Chris Predmore, to me, is pretty interesting at this point. College pitcher out of Sussex County Community College. Poor competition level there, but we think he's not far off major league quality at the age of 21. OSA, definitely not as high on him as we are, which is a little bit worrying. But I tend to trust our scout. I don't like some of the personality issues with Predmore, but to me it comes down to him or going with the college starting pitching prospect Anson Seibert out of the University of Tennessee. Fly ball pitcher, we talked about that. Don't necessarily love it. A little concerned about his lack of control and the fact that he doesn't quite have a third pitch. I think we're going to kind of follow the guy that our scout thinks has the higher floor with Mr. Predmore, and we're going to bring him on the board here in the fourth round. And moving on to the fifth round, all three of the pitchers that we only talked about one of them now, but we've also talked about Braddock and Lowry earlier. All three of those pitchers are still here, position player-wise. Piver and Bartholo both still around as well. So feel like we're able to add some pretty interesting talent in this draft thus far. Here in the fifth round, I do like Anson Seibert, but I think I'm going to try to take advantage of the fact that we didn't spend nearly all the money that we had this past off season, and we can take the best player available, even if he's relatively expensive. And to me, Doug Bartholo, even though it's a fourth outfielder in our 5 picks, is another guy who, if he reaches his full potential, is a really interesting player. He would think with 4 outfielders in the first 5 picks, one of whom is a college player that we hope is almost a can't miss, that we get 2 or 3 good major league outfielders out of this crew, and maybe we get a little lucky with one of them and we end up with a star. So we're going to go ahead with Bartholo, very expensive, about $3.5 million more over slot, but we can afford it at this point, so we're going to meet his demand here in the 5th round as well. And in the 6th round, Seibert is still around. Talked about the fly ball tendencies that we don't necessarily love, a little concerned about his control. He's going to need to develop that third pitch, but there certainly is a path to him becoming a useful major league pitcher. And in the 6th round, I don't really think we can ask for much more than that. And we ended up in the middle rounds of the draft taking a couple other guys that we needed to make offers to above slot. Starting pitcher Gregorio Olvera, who looks like he could be a useful arm if he reaches his full potential. Obviously at 18 years old, no guarantees about that. And then in the 10th round, took a high school second baseman, Jimmy Sabonis, switch hitter, who looks like his bat could be interesting once again if he reaches his full potential, which is not guaranteed, but felt like he was pretty decent value. So when all was said and done, pretty happy with the way the draft worked out. Definitely very outfielder heavy, but between Clawson, Miller, Gray, and Bartholo, think that we could have the makings of 2 or 3 guys who might be able to help us at the major league level. And as I talked about earlier, would love it if one of them could become a all-star type player. And with 4 shots on goal in the first 5 picks, certainly a chance that that could happen. And we've got a week of action left until we get to the AllStar break. 8 games overall, all against the Texas Rangers or the Arizona Diamondbacks, 4 each against both of those teams. Hoping that perhaps after another week or so of action, there will be some more interesting options to think about on the trade market. Taking a look at the trade block, just not a lot of interesting options out there. Feel like we probably need a little more help in terms of our position players than our pitchers. Unfortunately, not a lot of impact position players out there. Joan Duran, the brilliant closer for the Minnesota Twins, is in the final year of his contract. He would be a really nice addition for us. Extreme ground ball tendencies, incredible stuff, keeps the ball in the park. Unfortunately, for a 2.5-month rental, the price to me just seems prohibitive. As great as Duran is, the only way that we can get him is to give up Ezekiel Tovar, who, as we've talked about in previous episodes, is having an MVP caliber year for us, or Charlie Condon, Kevin Roberts, or Francisco Santos, who are the 3 top prospects in our organization. The price just seems too high to me. I'm not going to give up a top 50 prospect for a 2.5-month rental of a closer. Even though we are right now in position to have a first-round bye, we've got a 2.5-game lead on the Padres in the NL West. I just don't think that price is reasonable at all. And as we sit here on July 11th, the Twins still on the periphery of the wild card race, just half a game behind the final wild card spot in the American League. Maybe if things go really bad for them over the next couple of weeks and things continue going well for us, maybe the price will come down a little bit to what I would view as a more reasonable level for a rental of a guy who very well might only pitch 20, 25 innings for us. And although we won the first game of this last 8 days before the All-Star break to take the series at Texas, lost 4 in a row, 3 of them pretty close losses to our division rival Diamondbacks. So the lead has been shrinking, only a game and a half up on the Dodgers, 2 up on the Padres, and 2.5 up on the Diamondbacks. We still, shockingly, despite losing 4 in a row and being 3-7 in our last 10 with just a .538 winning percentage, would have a first-round bye, as we're still a game and a half better than the NL East leading Mets at this point, who also happen to be 3-7 in their last 10 in a division that is also getting tighter by the day. Hopefully we can do well in these last 3 games against the Rangers, before we get to the AllStar break. And good news, we've taken the first 2 games against Texas, so we're going to win a second consecutive series against the Rangers for whatever that is worth. Bad news, though, as we head into the AllStar break, another significant injury. We're going to lose our starting center fielder again. You'll remember we missed about 6 weeks of him with concussion syndrome back in the spring. Now going to be out 5 or 6 weeks with a strained shoulder. So that's definitely going to weaken us defensively and perhaps make us a little bit more reliant on trying to hit the trade market over these last few weeks of the month of July. And we've gotten most of our players signed, still waiting to hear what happens with the second round pick Ted Miller and the third round pick Sam Gray. But as high school players, their seasons are pretty much over at this point anyways. But we did just get Trent Clawson signed, our first round pick, and we are going to promote him. Actually, he's still on a loan, State College in the developmental league, so we'll let him continue to play there till he's ready to come back, and then we'll likely promote him right to Class A when he is ready to join us. And we did sweep the series with the Rangers, so we head into the AllStar break feeling better about things. Still only a 1.5 game lead over the Dodgers, who have also won 3 in a row. But the .552 winning percentage has us feeling somewhat better about things. The Dodgers, who are 1.5 games behind us, are in the final wild card spot at this point. So we don't have a huge margin for error as we sit here on July 19th with 12 days until the trade deadline. Tovar still leading the league in ribbies. Simpson still leading the league in seals. And Jesus Luzardo still second in the league in wins and second in the league in strikeouts in his first season with the Rockies. And before we finish things up, take a look at the AllStar Prospects game roster and see what type of representation we have. Reliever Alec Kranzler, who's with our ACL team, 22-year-old, who we picked in the 6th round a year ago. 12.87 earned run average as a reliever for us. Cannot say that I really understand why Kranzler is on the team. Wellington Herrera, on the other hand, makes a little bit more sense. He was one of our final cuts when we went down to the 26-man roster this year. 3.24 ERA with 19 saves in AAA. Would certainly expect that we'll be seeing the left-hander in September, if not earlier. We interestingly haven't had any substantive issues involving our pitching staff this year, which has made it a little more difficult for guys like Herrera to make it to the majors and get some of the experience that they are looking for. Oliver Cerati, who is in high A ball Spokane for us, 3.90 ERA over 27 2/3 innings for the soon-to-be 21-year-old. Another guy that doesn't necessarily make a ton of sense to me being named to the AllStar Prospects game, but we will take it. And then last, but certainly not least, the top prospect in our organization, Francisco Santos, who's dealt with some pretty significant injuries this year. Missed close to a month earlier in this season with that torn hammy. Hitting .261 in his first 46 professional at-bats. DSL season nearing an end. He's held his own as an 18-year-old. Certainly looking at what our scout thinks, still hopeful that Mr. Santos is going to turn into an important member of our offense in the not-too-distant future. Turning now to the actual All-Star game and any representation from the Rockies. Obviously, we'll have at least one person. Our closer, Ryan Walker, on the team, 26 saves, an ERA of 3, 42 strikeouts, and 42 innings pitched. Has only allowed 1 home run this year, putting up a 1.6 WAR. The acquisition of the veteran has turned out pretty well for us so far. No surprise also to see Ezekiel Tovar, who, as I mentioned earlier, is a potential MVP candidate named to the team. He has been struggling a bit of late. The batting average dipped to 263, and he's been stuck on 19 homers for a while, but still leading the league in runs batted in, 109 WRC plus, and a 3.3 WAR on the season for the shortstop. I just want to make sure I haven't missed anybody else on our Colorado team. And looks like that is it. 2 All-Stars for the Rockies this season. Before finishing up, we'll give you a quick look at who's available on the trade block. Not that we can't try to trade for other players. Taking a look at the batters, not necessarily any true super impact players for us. We could definitely use help in the corner outfield spots. Obviously, if there was a really good defensive center fielder, that would be something for us to think about with the most recent injury suffered by Mr. Doyle. But I don't necessarily think there's anyone that's going to be a massive difference maker that's out there. We definitely can pick up some of these guys. It's just a matter of whether or not it's worth it. Taking a look at the pitchers who are available, we already talked about Duran. I'm assuming the demand there is not going to be any different at this point than it was before. Yeah, still the top 3 prospects in our organization, or Mr. Tovar to get that deal done. Clearly could look for somebody not as dominant as him. A guy that I have been thinking about, who maybe I'm not thinking about anymore, is Anthony Bender, who's out for a month with a strained triceps. I thought he might be a good compromise candidate. The price on him was definitely more reasonable than Duran. Extreme ground ball tendencies, keeps the ball inside the park very well, but unlikely that he's going to be playing until mid-August at this point. So guessing the price on him will be even cheaper. Just don't know if it makes sense to pick up a guy who's going to be missing a good month before he'll be pitching for us. And actually, with that injury and the fact that I don't allow trading of players who are injured for more than a week in the settings this year, there's really no way that we can actually trade for him at this point. So don't need to really spend any effort at all thinking about that. But as we sit here on July 19th, we're in a pretty good spot, set up to hopefully return to the playoffs. All that's by no means guaranteed. Definitely feel that first base with Vinny Bascantino, DH with Hunter Goodman are spots that we could attempt to upgrade over the next week and a half. So if you've got any suggestions and ideas around that, would love to know it. Looks like Trent Clawson, very highly regarded, said we were supposed to find a top 20 prospect, and supposedly he ranks about number 5 according to this ranking system. So I don't know how accurate that really is, but feel a little better about potentially bringing the number 5 prospect in baseball on board with the 24th pick of this draft. Think that might be a little hyperbole from our scout, but hey, he convinced us to take him in the first round. He's going to have to be supportive of him going forward. Would love to know what you think about the upcoming trade deadline. Would love to know what you think about the draft. And next time around, we'll be playing through the trade deadline and trying to keep this Rockies team on a path to the playoffs. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.